All right, let's talk about one of the most important books ever written. A book so good, so eerily accurate about the future, that reading it today feels less like fiction and more like reading tomorrow's newspaper. The book is Fahrenheit 451, written by Bradbury and published in 1953. The title refers to the temperature at which paper catches fire and burns. That's not just a cool name, it's the entire soul of the story summed up in 2 words and a number. Now here's the fun part. Before we dive in, imagine this. You wake up one morning and your job, your actual government-approved, salary-paying job, is to burn books. Not just burn them, but burn down the houses they're found in. And not only is this legal, it's heroic. People look up to you. You wear a uniform. You have a shiny truck. You are, in every sense of the word, a fireman. Except instead of putting fires out, you start them. That is the world of Fahrenheit 451. And trust me, by the end of this summary, you are going to feel deeply unsettled because this world is not as far from ours as we'd like to believe. Hard one. The world of the story, let's set the scene first, because the world Bradbury built is just as important as the plot itself. The story takes place in a future version of America. No specific year is given, and that's intentional. Bradbury wanted it to feel like it could be any time, near future, far future, maybe next Tuesday. In this world, society has evolved, or more accurately, devolved into a state of enforced superficiality. People are always moving fast. Cars race down highways at insane speeds. Billboards have been made enormous, hundreds of feet tall, because people drive so fast they can't read normal-sized signs anymore. Nobody walks anywhere. Nobody stops to look at anything. People spend almost all of their time glued to massive television screens that cover entire walls of their homes. These aren't regular TVs. These are interactive experiences. The shows talk back to you. They call you by name. They make you feel like part of the story. People refer to the characters in these shows as their family. Their real family, sitting in the same room, might as well not exist. On top of the wall screens, people constantly wear tiny seashell radios, little earbuds that pipe music and talk shows and noise directly into their heads all day long. The goal is simple. Never be alone with your thoughts. Never sit in silence. Never have to feel anything real or think anything complicated. Nobody reads books. Nobody reads much of anything, really. Attention spans have shrunk to almost nothing. Schools focus on sports, on feelings, on moving fast and feeling good. History is barely taught. Literature doesn't exist as a subject anymore. Critical thinking is not only unused, it is actively discouraged. And books? Books are illegal, completely, totally, criminally illegal. How did it get this way? That's the brilliant twist Bradbury builds into the story. The government didn't wake up one day and decide to ban books by force. It happened gradually, driven by the people themselves. Society got so addicted to easy entertainment that complex ideas started feeling like an attack. Books made people uncomfortable. A novel about race offended one group. A book about religion upset another. A political book made half the country angry. Rather than deal with the discomfort, society demanded everything be simplified, sanitized, and stripped of anything that might cause conflict. Publishers shortened books, then condensed them further. Then reduced them to summaries, then abandoned them entirely. The government saw what was happening and simply made it official. Burn the books. Eliminate the source of conflict. Keep everyone happy, comfortable, distracted, and most importantly, unthinking. And the firemen? They're the enforcement arm of the system. When someone is reported to have books hidden in their home, the firemen arrive, douse the house in kerosene, and set it on fire. The books burn, the house burns, and society sleeps soundly that night. Meet Monte. Our hero, or at least our main character. The story follows a man named Guy Montag. He is a fireman. He has been a fireman for 10 years. He is good at his job. He is proud of his job. And at the start of the story, he is completely fine with his job. He loves the smell of kerosene. He loves the feel of the flamethrower in his hands. He grins when the books catch fire. He sleeps well at night. Montag is 30 years old. He lives in a clean, modern apartment with his wife, Mildred. Their life looks on the surface perfectly normal for this world. Mildred spends her day watching her wall screens and listening to her seashells. They don't have children. They don't really have conversations. They exist side by side like 2 strangers who happen to share an address. Montag has never questioned any of this. Why would he? Everyone lives this way. This is just life. But something is about to crack. Meeting Dad changes everything. Claire's one evening, walking home from work, Montag meets his new neighbor. Her name is Clarice McClellan. She is 17 years old. Clarice is, by the standards of this future world, completely bizarre. She walks slowly. She looks at things. She stops to taste the rain and smell the flowers and notice the man in the moon. She asks questions. Not practical questions, but deep ones. Strange ones. Strange ones. Questions like, are you happy? And have you ever watched the old films where people used to just sit and talk for hours? And do you ever read any of the books you burn? Montag finds her deeply unsettling, not because she's threatening, but because she makes him feel things he has no vocabulary for. She is genuinely curious about him as a person, not about his job, not about what he watches on TV, but about him, who he is, what he thinks, what he feels. Their conversations are short. They happen over a few weeks as they walk the same street, but they are transformative. After one of these conversations, Montag walks into his apartment and Clarissa's question rings in his head. Are you happy? He looks around at his empty apartment. He looks at the closed bedroom door behind which Mildred is asleep with her seashells in her ears. He looks at his reflection in the dark window, and he realizes for the first time in his life that he's not happy. He has never been happy. He doesn't even know what happiness would feel like. That crack in him, tiny at first, like a hairline fracture, begins to grow. Mildred's overdose. The horror of numbness. That same night, Montag discovers that Mildred has overdosed on sleeping pills, an entire bottle. Whether it was a suicide attempt or just a careless accident, even Mildred herself won't be able to say. Montag calls for help in a panic. But the people who arrive are not doctors. They are technicians. 2 flat-eyed, bored men with a machine that pumps stomachs and a different machine that replaces blood. They explain that they do 10 or 15 of these calls every night. It is routine. It is so common it doesn't even require a medical degree anymore. The next morning, Mildred wakes up. She feels fine. She doesn't remember anything. When Montag tries to talk to her about what happened, tries to reach her, tries to find out if she's okay, tries to connect, she looks at him blankly with faint irritation and turns the wall screen back on. This scene is one of the most quietly devastating moments in the entire book. Bradbury isn't showing us a dramatic breakdown. He's showing us something scarier. A person so completely hollowed out by distraction and numbness that she nearly died in the night and doesn't even register by morning. Mildred is not a villain. She's a victim. And she doesn't even know it. The burning woman. See this plan, Montag continues working. He continues burning, but Clarissa's questions have made him look at things differently, and what he starts to see disturbs him. One night, the firemen are called to an old woman's house, and this call is different from all the others. This woman did not hide her books in time. Her house is absolutely full of them, stacked floor to ceiling, piled in every room. It is a kind of shrine, a library, a life's work of collected thought. Firemen do their job. They douse everything in kerosene. They tell the woman she has to leave. She refuses. She stands in the middle of her books, surrounded by the smell of kerosene, and she refuses to move. In her hand, she holds a single match. Before the fireman can react, she strikes it. She burns with her books. The firemen stand there stunned. You don't expect that. You don't prepare for someone who loves ideas so much she would die rather than let them be destroyed. Montag is deeply, profoundly shaking. He cannot stop thinking about it. What was in those books? What idea is worth dying for? What does she know that he doesn't? Without even seeing, before the fire consumed everything, Montag slipped one book inside his coat. It wasn't the first time. As we soon discover, Montag has been secretly taking books from burn sites for years. Hidden in the ventilation shaft of his own home, behind a grill in the hallway wall, is a small secret collection. A man who burns books for a living has been quietly, almost unconsciously, saving them. The contradiction at the center of Guy Montag is fully revealed. And now for the first time, he is starting to understand it himself. Part 2. The Sieve in the Sand. The title of this section refers to a memory Montag has from childhood. As a boy, someone told him that if he could fill a sieve with sand, he'd get a dime. He tried desperately, pouring sand in as fast as he could, but it always fell through the sieve before it could fill up. He cried with frustration. And as an adult, he feels the same way about books. He reads frantically, desperately, trying to absorb the ideas before they slip away from him. For the world, he lives and empties his mind of everything he takes in. He calls in sick to work and stays home to read. Mildred is horrified and confused. Her friends come over to watch the wall screens and chat about their TV families, completely oblivious to the crisis unfolding 3 feet away from them. In one uncomfortable scene, Montag tries to read poetry to Mildred and her friends, a group of shallow, chattering women who have never once considered that life might contain more than what's on their screens. He reads a poem aloud. One of the women bursts into tears without understanding why. The words have reached something in her she didn't know was there, and it frightens her. She leaves in a huff. It's a remarkable moment. Even the people who think they've been successfully emptied, literature can still find a door. Professor Faber. The wise, frightened mentor Montag is desperately in need of guidance. He has books, but he doesn't know what to do with them. He doesn't fully understand what he's reading. He doesn't know who to trust. He remembers a man he met a year earlier in a public park, a retired English professor named Faber. Faber had been sitting alone, reading. When he saw Montag coming, he hid what he was doing. But before Montag could report him, Faber had pressed a piece of paper with his address into Montag's hand and slipped away. Montag never reported him. He kept the address. Now he goes to find Faber. Faber is old and frightened and has been living in careful hiding for years. He is the last type of person you'd expect to lead a revolution. Timid, self-critical, deeply aware of his own cowardice. But he is brilliant and he's honest. And when Montag comes to him with his burning questions, Faber gives him one of the most important speeches in the entire novel. Faber explains that it is not books themselves that matter. It is the quality of information they carry, the deep human experience they preserve. He says there are 3 things missing from their society that books represent. First, quality information, kind of high definition, detailed, nuanced truth that can only come from a writer who spent years getting the world right on the page. Second, leisure, the time and space to sit with information, to digest it, to let it change you. A society that is always rushing, always distracted, never stops long enough to let ideas take root. Third, the right to act on what you've learned, freedom. The freedom to take what you understood and do something with it. Without all 3, Faber explains books are just paper. With all 3, they are alive. Faber gives Montag a tiny 2-way radio earpiece, small enough to hide in his ear. Through this device, Faber can speak to Montag, hear what's happening around him, and coach him through whatever comes next. It is a small, fragile lifeline between the 2 men, a connection built on shared desperation. Together, they come up with an imperfect, half-formed plan. They will plant books in the homes of firemen and call in the alarm themselves to destroy the firemen's credibility and plant seeds of doubt in the public mind. It's not a great plan. Both men know it. But they commit to it anyway because doing something is better than doing nothing. Captain Beatty, the villain who knows everything now, we need to talk about Captain Beatty because he is one of the most remarkable characters in American literature. He is the fire chief. He is Montag's boss. He is intelligent, sharp, intimidating, and utterly devoted to the system of censorship and burning. Montag calls in sick. Beatty pays him a visit at home because Beatty always seems to know exactly what is happening in his firemen's lives and minds. And then Beatty delivers a monologue, a long, devastating, brilliantly constructed explanation of how the world came to be the way it is. He explains the full history of censorship, not as a government conspiracy, but as an organic social process. He describes how technology made life faster, how attention spans shortened, how people began to demand simpler and simpler versions of everything. He talks about how minority groups complained about being misrepresented in books, and then other groups complained, and eventually every book offended somebody. So books were condensed, then condensed further, then eliminated entirely. He talks about how firemen used to put fires out back when houses were built from wood and burned accidentally. But modern houses are fireproof. The fire department had no purpose anymore until it was repurposed. He quotes books at Montag. He recites poetry. He throws passages from philosophers and novelists at him, using them as weapons to show that books contradict each other, that they provide no clear answers, that they are a source of confusion and misery and conflict. And here's the thing that makes Beatty truly terrifying. He has read all of it. Every book he burns, he has read. He is one of the most well-read men alive, and he has used every page he ever read to arrive at the conclusion that books should not exist. He chose the fire, deliberately, with full knowledge. That is not ignorance. That is something much darker than ignorance. He leaves Montag to wrestle with what he's heard. But before he goes, he drops one quiet, poisonous statement. Every fireman, he says, gets the itch at some point. They all want to read. He gives them 24 hours, and he expects the book back and the itch gone. Montag does not scratch the itch. The itch is all he has left. The alarm. Montag's unhoused. Montag goes back to the firehouse. He tries to act normal. He fails. Then the alarm sounds. The firemen climb into the truck, engines roaring, the great mechanical beast of their trade rumbling to life. Montag feels something cold settle in his stomach as they drive. They stop in front of his own house. Mildred is outside with her suitcases already packed. She walks past Montag to a waiting taxi without a word and without looking at him. She called the alarm. His wife reported him. She gathered her things and left, and the only thing she left behind was the address for the fireman. B is calm, almost amused. He tells Montag to do his job. Montag has to burn his own house, his own home. Room by room with a flamethrower, he destroys everything. The bedroom, walls, the kitchen, the hiding place in the ventilation shaft where his books had lived for years. It is a painful, extraordinary scene. The act of a man being forced to erase himself. Part 3. Burning bright when the house is ash, B turns to Montag with something in his expression that is almost satisfaction. He finds Faber's earpiece still in Montag's ear. He tells Montag he will trace the signal back to wherever it came from, find whoever is on the other end, and burn that too. Something inside Montag breaks completely open. He turns the flamethrower on Beatty and kills him. The act is sudden, violent, and shocking, and yet Bradbury writes it in a way that makes you feel, almost immediately, that Beatty wanted this, that this is how Beatty chose to end a life that had become intolerable to him. A man who knew everything and chose destruction, perhaps in the end including his own. Now Montag is a murderer and a fugitive. The mechanical hound is released, a robotic police dog, 8-legged, with a needle full of tranquilizer instead of fangs. It has been programmed to Montag's personal chemical signature, but will not stop. Montag runs. He is injured in the leg. The hound catches him briefly before he gets away. He wades through the cold water of a river, washing his scent away, floating downstream in the dark. He drags himself out of the water on the far bank, outside the city limits, in a world he has never visited before. The countryside. Real trees. Real sky. Real silence. Montag has lived his entire life in the city, and he has never experienced genuine quiet. He is overwhelmed by it, frightened by it, and then slowly comforted by it. The book people. A hidden world following a set of railroad tracks, guided by the faint smell of wood smoke. Montag finds a fire. But this fire is different from every other fire in his life. This fire is small. It is contained. It is built for warmth, not destruction. People are sitting around it with their hands stretched out toward the heat, talking quietly. It is the first fire Montag has ever seen that was kind. The man who leads this group is called Granger. He is calm and measured and welcoming. The group he leads is a collection of exiles, professors, writers, historians, scientists, doctors, and ordinary people who fled the cities because they love books and refuse to stop. But here's the genius of what they have done. They don't carry books. Books can be found. Books can be burned. Books are evidence. Instead, each person in this group has memorized an entire book. They have become the books. They are living libraries. One man is the entirety of Plato's Republic. Another carries all of Charles Darwin. One woman has every word of the Bible. Another man has memorized a complete medical textbook. When they introduce themselves, they don't give their names first. They tell you what book they are. Granger tells Montag that he has already memorized something without knowing it. From all those stolen hours of reading, all those hidden books, a portion of the book of Ecclesiastes has lodged itself permanently inside him. He is already part of this library. He already belongs here. Montag learns that this group exists in communities all over the country. Hundreds, maybe thousands of people, all quietly walking around with the entire history of human thought preserved inside their minds. They are waiting. Not fighting, not staging a rebellion. Just waiting. Surviving. Keeping the knowledge alive until the world is ready to want it again. This city burns. The war arrow is all through the novel. War has been lurking in the background. People mention it casually, the way they mention the weather. Planes overhead, tension with unnamed enemies. The sense that something enormous and terrible is approaching. Nobody seems particularly worried. The wall screens don't cover it much. It's not entertaining enough. And then, in a single devastating moment, it arrives. The jets come. The bombs fall. The city. The entire city. The wall screens and the seashell radios and the empty apartments and the racing cars and every hollow person within it is obliterated, gone in seconds. Not a battle, not a siege, just an ending. From the hillside where they stand, Montag and the book people watch the distant light. The sky turns white and then orange and then dark again. A shockwave rolls through the earth beneath their feet. Montag thinks of Mildred somewhere in that city. He tries to find her in his memory. The real her, the one that might have existed under all the noise and distraction, and grieves that he never really knew her, that she never really knew herself. We'll walk hard tomorrow when the light fades and the smoke begins to clear. Granger turns to the group. He talks about the phoenix, the mythological bird that burns itself to ashes and rises again from the fire, reborn. He says humans have been doing this for centuries, burning themselves down and starting over. The difference between humans and the phoenix, he says, is that we know what we're doing. We have the ability to remember, to learn, to decide not to make the same mistakes. He doesn't know if you managed that this time. Nobody does. But the book people turn and begin walking toward what is left of the city, not with triumph, not with anger or vengeance, but because there are people there who survive, survivors who will be frightened and lost and in need of help. And the book people have the most valuable thing in the world to offer them: the accumulated wisdom of every human being who ever thought deeply enough to write something down. They walk. Montag walks with them. He carries Ecclesiastes inside him like a heartbeat. And as they walk, he begins quietly reciting the words to himself. The ancient honest words about seasons and time and loss and meaning, readying himself to speak them aloud to the first person who needs to hear them. Deeper meaning. What Bradbury was really saying. Now let's zoom out and talk about what this book actually means, because Fahrenheit 451 is much richer than a simple book's good, fire bad story. Ray Bradbury wrote this novel in 1953, and he was responding to several things at once. He was watching McCarthyism sweep through America, the era of blacklists and accusations where people were destroyed for having the wrong ideas. He was watching television take hold of American living rooms for the first time. He was watching attention spans shorten and popular culture become shallower. He was deeply, genuinely afraid. But what makes the book remarkable is that his fear was not of a totalitarian government imposing censorship by force. His deepest fear, the one he built the entire novel around, was that people would choose ignorance voluntarily, that society would censor itself, that distraction would do what oppression could not. In Fahrenheit 451, nobody forced people to give up books. They gave them up because books were uncomfortable. Books made them feel things they didn't want to feel. Books told them truths they didn't want to hear. Books reminded them that other people had different experiences and different values, and that was irritating and confusing and frankly just a lot to deal with when there was perfectly good entertainment available at all hours. That is the horror at the heart of this novel. Not jackboots, not censorship edicts. Just a slow, voluntary surrender of the human mind to the path of least resistance. Bradbury is essentially asking us, are we sure we're any different? Are we sure that our endless feeds and our streaming services and our algorithmic entertainment and our noise-canceling earbuds aren't doing exactly what the seashells do in his novel? Are we feeling every moment of silence before we have to actually think? He's not saying technology is evil. He's saying that the choice to never be alone with our thoughts is a dangerous one. That depth requires discomfort. That meaning requires silence. And a person who never reads anything difficult, never sits with an idea that challenges them, never expands beyond what they already know. That person is halfway to Mildred already. The tractor Betty. The saddest figure in the book. Before we close, we have to spend more time on Captain Beatty, because he is the character that haunts you after you finish this book. Beatty is not ignorant. He is the opposite of ignorant. He has read more than almost anyone alive. He has absorbed philosophy and poetry and history and science and literature. He understands at an intellectual level everything the books have to offer. And he chose to burn them anyway. Why? Bradbury never gives us a complete answer, but the portrait he paints suggests a man who read everything and found it insufficient. A man who encountered all the greatest ideas humanity ever produced and was still unhappy, still empty, still lost. And in his bitterness, and the private devastation of a man who expected wisdom to save him and found that it didn't, he turned against the thing he loved. He uses his knowledge as a weapon. He quotes contradictory passages to show that great minds disagree. He points out that ideas cause conflict. He argues, with real sophistication, that ignorance is kinder than knowledge, that a society of happy, distracted, unthinking people is actually more humane than a society torn apart by competing ideas. He is wrong, of course, but he is wrong in the most intelligent way possible. And in those final moments when Montag turns the flamethrower on him and Beatty doesn't try to escape, there is the unmistakable sense that Beatty wanted this, that he was a man who had been waiting a long time for someone to finally end the argument. Beatty is not a villain you hate. He is a villain you mourn, and that is much harder to sit with. The spark, we should also honor Clarissa McClellan more, because she is gone by the midpoint of the novel, and yet she is the reason everything happens. Khalees does not save Montag with grand speeches or revolutionary ideas. She saves him with small things. She shows him a dandelion and rubs it under his chin to see if he's in love. She tilts her face up to feel the rain. She asks him if he's ever tasted the rain. She wants to know why firemen never became firemen to prevent fires, only to start them. She is 17 years old, and she is more awake than every adult in the novel combined. And she is killed casually by a speeding car before the story is half over, because in a world that moves too fast to think, a girl who moves slowly enough to notice things is always in danger. Her death is not given a chapter. It is mentioned almost in passing, the way things get mentioned when nobody cares enough to make them important. And that is the point. Montag carries her with him for the rest of the novel. Every question she planted in him keeps growing long after she is gone. She is the proof that one person who is truly awake can change another person's life entirely. just by asking the right questions and being genuinely, curiously, fearlessly themselves. Why this book matters right now, here's the final thought, and it's the most important one. Fahrenheit 451 was published over 70 years ago. Ray Bradbury died in 2012. He lived long enough to see smartphones and social media and the internet and streaming platforms and the complete fragmentation of human attention. And in interviews, he said that the world he had imagined in 1953 had arrived faster than he expected. The books are not literally being burned, but they don't have to be. Bradbury's real point was never about fire. It was about what happens when a society decides that thinking is too hard and feeling is too uncomfortable and silence is too frightening. It was about what we lose when we choose noise over depth every time for long enough. The book people in Fahrenheit 451 are not heroes because they fight the system. They are heroes because they remember. Because they chose, in the face of a world that demanded they forget, to hold on, to carry something precious inside themselves, through the dark, until the world was ready to receive it. That is the invitation Bradbury extends to every reader. Be someone who carries something. Read the difficult book. Sit in the silence. Ask the questions that don't have easy answers. Be a little like Clarice. Slow enough to notice the rain, curious enough to ask why, brave enough to wonder if you're actually happy, because the temperature at which books burn is 451 degrees Fahrenheit. But the temperature at which minds go dark, that requires no fire at all. The end of summary. Fahrenheit 451, Ray Bradbury. Published 1953 summary script. Full-length audio version.